Truth Talks is an initiative to just remind people that if you are pursuing success, peace, happiness, the simplest tool is truth. We have had series of speakers, and I bet it's not easy to get a speaker for Truth Talks. But you have seen some of the names here. And we hope to have deeper and deeper engagement with our audience and volunteers. To introduce you, Nipun Bhai, however difficult I have to. Born in India, but he grew up mainly in the US, went to the exceptional Berkeley University. After Berkeley University, went to work for Sun Microsystem, and as you may have seen in the video, saw what a chase it was. Over the last more than 20 years, he has created a world of smiles, of giving small acts of kindness, which have made big shifts in people's hearts. And when there is a shift in your heart, how it transmits into the network, into your families, and it leads to a more interconnected world. The result is just 500,000 people who work directly with Nipun Bhai's ServiceSpace, and millions of others whose life has been positively impacted. ServiceSpace works on what we call Sanatan principles, that how giving starts changing you, how there is a power in the world which you tap when you give. So we're going to hear from the original scientist here. Nipun Bhai, I would think it would be appropriate to just let you go.
We're changing the plans.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Vallabh Bhai. And thank you to the Truth Talks team.
I think you find you.
Oh, I see. Can you hear me? In the front, clearly, but in the back. Otherwise, this will be a meditation session for all of you in the back. I see. Okay. Well, we will do the best we can. Should we stand up there and just... So as I was saying, I was on this journey of success, external success. And I remember specifically this one moment. I was driving down in the Silicon Valley and going, from one place to another. I saw this billboard. And this billboard said, "He who dies with the most toys still dies." And I realized that actually my whole life I was after toys. This toy, that toy, building up, accumulating, right? And at some point I had to understand what actually is underneath all of that. What happens when you face your mortality? And usually you do this much later in life, but for me it was a very present question, even early on in my life. And so as I pursued this, I realized that instead of going for more and more and more, I wondered if there was another way. I remember Oprah had done an interview with the Dalai Lama, and she asked him a question, with this one line. They have long interviews, and at the end, they ask this one quick thing, And she says, Dalai Lama, what is one thing you know for sure? And Dalai Lama replies back, he says, what I know for sure is that it takes giving to be happy. Oh, you can't hear it. You missed Dalai Lama's punchline. He said, yes, Dalai Lama said. Dalai Lama replies to Oprah, something changed. It was working pretty good before. What do you suggest, Vallabh Bhai?
We'll have Dhamma help us. So, universe is asking us to ask you, how about both of us sit in the middle
without mic.
All of you sit around us.
So this guy in the bathroom, I see that he's actually checking all the toilet stalls. And I realized he's the janitor. He was doing his job. And so I said, maybe I can help you with it. And so I started doing that job. He didn't know I was going to be on stage giving a talk, right before my talk. And then I was saying that he actually comes up to me and he says, your phone number, email, and he's not intimidated at all. So imagine I saw some big names, Rahul Dravid and all this. Imagine if he was here, right? And you meet him in the bathroom and then you realize, oh, this is that guy. And then you go up to him and he says, look, forget all these people. What about that email? I have to give you a ride next time. On what authority is he saying that? That is love's authority. He is saying, man, I feel a connection in my heart, and that connection is stronger than all this phenomena. And that became a teaching moment for me, right? The same lesson we are all learning here. That we think that center is elsewhere, but actually everywhere is the center. That the show is not there. There is no there. It's here. That actually none of us really knows the ripple effect of what's going to happen in this moment, in any moment. We like to think we are in control, but actually it's always been an emergent phenomena. When Vinobaji, Gandhiji's successor, one time he was having a conversation and someone says, Vinobaji, you have created so many projects in the world. It is amazing. Your impact is amazing. Vinobaji says, no, I have not started any project. I'm assuming everyone knows who Vinoba is. Someone was telling me that you go to schools and you ask who is Vinoba. They say, oh, he's somebody's grandmother, right? With someone's ba. But Vinobaji was an incredible human being. Gandhiji had so much respect for him. And Vinobaji did so much. But when someone says, what have you done? He says, I haven't started any project. How can he say that? Now, he is a man of truth. But he is not a man of conventional truth. He is probably going for the capital T. And in that capital T world, what he's saying is that we don't actually know where something starts and where something ends. We think that Truth Talk starts at 5:30 over there in a certain way, and it ends at 7 o'clock, and then we will have some snacks. But actually, it takes all of existence and all of cosmos for you to be here, for me to be here. If your great-grandfather, my great-grandmother slipped on a banana peel somewhere and went in some direction, we would not be here together. So Vinobaji is looking at all this and he's saying, look, man, nothing is an interruption. Nothing is out of pattern. Everything is perfect as is, and none of us are actually starting anything or ending anything. He would say, I'm anarambi. So in that sense, if we can meet life, and some causes and conditions lead us to this moment, and some causes and conditions lead us, we don't know where it's going to go. If we can embrace life in that way, it's joy, right? It's a fantastic thing. It's like you are meeting your family. Like I can tell you, even in this moment, it feels, you guys don't know this, but it feels amazing to be in this spot here. So I think in some sense, emergence has been a great teaching for me. And this is my long way of saying I'm happy to be here. And I'm happy you are here. And I'm happy all of us are meeting with this kind of a mindset that every place is the center, that there are no interruptions, and it's all great. When you don't have an agenda, how can it not be great? I mean, this is all. So that's my introduction. Thank you. I know there are questions, so I'll behave.
So Nipun bhai, we are going to throw the floor open for questions much earlier than we had
Let's
planned.
do that. That'll be awesome.
We had planned.
Yes.
But I still need to take the privilege of asking you a few questions.
Yes.
And so, you are an exceptional person, not because you think you're an exceptional person, but we think you're an exceptional person, right? The Vinobaji thing, etc. And this is because we think reaching somewhere, getting a graduation, getting a job, getting a house, and whatever, etc.,
Yeah.
is very important for life.
Yeah.
The fact that some people are able to manage exceptionally without doing all of this,
Yeah.
but the statistics are against it. If you don't get all of this,
Yeah.
a lot of people are in trouble, actually. And therefore, it is hard for them to go with the flow as you're prescribing.
Yeah.
Not that what you're saying is wrong.
You're right.
Clearly, we have seen enough examples. But there is somewhere a middle path. It would be very useful for you to explain how do you see this balance that not that you don't pursue a career,
Yeah.
you don't pursue education, but and the second part is emergence.
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There has to be a balance, there has to be a middle path.
Yeah. So I from the way I hear your question, I think what you're saying is on one side, we have to go out and do things in the world. We have to have some sort of a default plan. We go to school, we learn how to learn more than even the subjects. We learn how to fail. We go experiment, we try, we work hard. I used to want to be a tennis player. And I would work very hard. And every time I lose, I would come back and work a little harder. But over time, I think what I realized is that narrative of working harder to get what you want doesn't actually hold up under scrutiny. That what we get, we do need to work, we do need to have effort. But with effort, with this grit, we have to understand the power of surrender. So if it is just effort, it doesn't work. If it is just surrender, it also doesn't work. So you have to find the middle way. And how will you find the middle way and not choose the wrong thing at the wrong time? When it is time to surrender, you can say, I'm going to be full of effort. And when it is time to put your effort, you will say, oh, I'm just going to surrender. So how do we figure out? There's a beautiful prayer, serenity prayer. You guys might have heard that. May I have the courage to change the things I can, the patience to accept the things I cannot change. Patience, is it? No, and the wisdom to know the difference. But that difference, I think, is the real challenge. It's not that you should not try, and it's not that you shouldn't surrender, but it's that how will I cultivate the wisdom to know the difference between the two and know when to adopt which tool. And I think that's the $1 million question.
That's $1 million question, and everyone has come here to earn that million here. And I see a lot of mothers have brought young children with them, and the children are listening very intently. That here is the guest telling us to surrender. So I think as we go along, we get this clarity because we chose our topic, and this topic was suggested out of many that we, put before him. Truth, trust, and transformation.
Yeah.
So this is all about transformation.
Yeah.
Like you had this spark that everyone is here, grab, and then, you wanted to experiment and so on.
Yeah.
So I want you to go back to this crazy experiment that you did with your wife, right?
That's
Soon after his marriage, he went on a 3-month pilgrimage in India, hoping to receive people's grace and kindness for their food, for their shelter. And they walked and walked and walked until someone would give them food and shelter. This was 20 years ago, roughly?
a little less, yeah.
Little less.
18, yeah.
Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, that was, actually, coming to think of it, that experiment was an experiment of truth, of trust, and transformation. So my wife and I, so we were in the Silicon Valley in 1999. We created a project to help other people. And we were building websites for nonprofits, and then it turned into a lot of other things. But you can get caught up, you can have golden handcuffs. Even with good work, you can get caught in that. Even if you don't have financial capital, you can have influence, and that influence can also corrupt your spirit. So we were like, can you drop all this? And my wife especially, she's one of my heroes, My wife especially was like, if we can't drop this, Nipun, then we might be tricking ourselves. So she says, and I said, that let's sell everything we have, take a few boxes. Here we have young kids, so I don't know. This is like, I'm going to share my story, so we'll have fun with it. And you take we put our few boxes at my parents' house. Gandhi was an inspiration for us, so we decided to go to the Gandhi ashram. And we said, we are going to walk south. We're going to eat whatever food is offered, sleep wherever place is offered. And along the way, we are going to do small acts of love, small acts of kindness. And you do this, we are living in the US. Every time I would come here, I would have Bisleri bottles to drink from, And here, you are not carrying any water. Forget even money, You don't have any, your fundamental resources are all gone. So what are you going to, how deep is your trust in the universe? That was really tested. So we would walk every day. Now imagine if I took all your wallets, cell phones, and I dropped you in I don't know, Maharashtra or we are in Maharashtra, okay,
Yeah, you're all
Karnataka,
over.
I drop you somewhere where you don't know anybody. How will you survive? Most of us think we survive based on the security of what we have accumulated. Our thought was that we will survive based on the love we can generate. If we love, if we generate that feeling of compassion, if that translates then into action, and that action, if it is selfless, it will create a relationship. And if you have enough of those relationships, someone's cup of gratitude somewhere will overflow, and they will feel like saying, like the janitor in the bathroom in Austria, they will say, can I make you an offering? How far can you go with that? So we didn't know. We tried it. And it was amazing. To this day, I cannot start a meal without being grateful. Because we received our meals not from people who had a lot. We received our meals from people who had nothing. People would borrow food, Vallabh Bhai, to offer us a meal. They don't even know us. And how do you hold that? What do you say to them? No, I don't want it. Or should you be humble and say, I receive your offering? And how do you receive that offering? These are all the very profound things. And I got continuous, both of us, my wife and I, but I think it was harder on me because I had a bigger ego. So this thing rubs you in all kinds of ways because you want security. Like I meet you, you feed me, and I want to cling to you. Like tomorrow, will you feed, take care of me? No, you got to keep walking. So where is your security coming from? Not what you have, but even if it is 42 degrees, even if you are in a bad mood, even if the circumstances don't look good, can you still generate goodwill in your heart? Can you still generate metta in your heart? That was our practice. And my God, it is absolutely unbelievable how life responds, I could tell you stories after stories of what happened there. Vallabh Bhai, I'll tell one story.
Yep.
Because I like this story because it doesn't make me look good. This is a story, this has always stayed with me, actually. It was a very profound moment for me. We were in this area where there were very few people. So we didn't know where we were going to get our food, and even water was very difficult to get. So we were walking and we see this small hut, and somebody this grandmother comes out of the hut. She sees these two people walking, and she says, you guys come to my hut, you must be thirsty. And we were very thirsty. She goes inside, brings us in like half a matka, she brings us some water. And I later realized it had taken her 4 hours to get that water.
Oh.
But she just gives it to us. Then she looks at us, probably especially me, and she says, you look hungry. Are you hungry? I said, on a pilgrimage, I didn't want to ask, but I was like, yeah, I'm very hungry. So she probably saw that on her face, and out of compassion, she looks and she says, I have these gotas, she made some fried dumplings. And so she says, I'll give this. She offered it to us. And we felt great, in that context, to receive water and a little bit of food felt like a big blessing. But while she was being kind to us, the grandfather is looking at us and not even actually acknowledging much, He's in some prayers, he's doing his thing. And I thought it's kind of odd, that he's not even acknowledging us. So I said, okay, maybe he's in some deep prayer. But right as we were leaving, he says, what are you guys doing? So I said, we are trying to become better human beings, seek more truth than what we have right now. And I said, I described what we were doing. And he says, oh, I see, okay. Where did you guys start from? I said, Kaka, or Dada, I think probably Dada at that time. Now it would be Kaka. Dada, we started from Ahmedabad, So he says, oh, Mehmedabad. So I said, no, Ahmedabad, not Mehmedabad, Mehmedabad is a different city. So he says, yeah, that's what I said, Mehmedabad. So I thought maybe he's a little hard of hearing, So I said, no, not Mehmedabad, Ahmedabad. અહીંયાથી 127 કિલોમીટર દૂર છે. 127 kilometers from here. And he tells me in one sentence, he says, oh, so I see that you are not on a pilgrimage after all. So I said, why? What do you mean? I'm on a pilgrimage. Why am I not on it? He says, you are still keeping track of the number of kilometers.
Oh.
And even then, I was also shocked, actually. Like, how did I know it was 127, right? Like, if I would have rounded up or down or something, I could have said, yeah, approximately 120, I could have made anything up. But I knew. So I'd left everything, but my mind still was continuing. Right? So the pilgrimage kept on teaching us lesson after lesson after lesson. This truth is a slippery slope. This trust takes a lot of inner resources. This transformation is not going to happen by your Google Calendar. It is going to happen when the time ripens. And that was an incredible, it was day after day after day after day of just learning that lesson.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you said it is not going to happen by a Google Calendar.
Yeah.
And in a world which is 5G speeds and so on, and most of all, borrowing is now the new culture, which means I must get my gratification even if I have to borrow. It becomes such a culture. So there is a real challenge, just as I posed this question of surrender and effort, where is the balance? This is a real question for people. I have a related question. Many of the people here, they follow many masters, but you see the world is full of seekers. So this patience, how does one build this patience, and where is the school for patience?
I think life is the school of patience. You cannot actually negotiate with life. We all think we can. We think we can get away with it. We think we can pull a fast one. I'm suffering here, so let me change the door. But actually, there is no negotiation with karma. There is no negotiation with life. So we have no choice but to grow in patience.
So I want to put you on a spot, Nipun Bhai.
I'm ready to be. I'm clearly at some spot or another, yes.
In the sense that there are a lot of good thoughts around us, and we do get inspired. But this taking a 3-month pilgrimage, doing that effort, and while doing the effort, the readiness for surrender is something that is not taught anywhere. And therefore, these stories of transformation that, we talked about in your introduction brought a lot of intrigue and brought a lot of people. And maybe this digital, connection also will bring more people. If we can explain this, how does this transformation happen? Sometimes it is the certainty of transformation that will attract people, even if it takes time.
Yeah.
Like people are ready to go to, a far off place. People go trekking. So people, I see that they have two calendars. There are things in which, they'll go to a five-star restaurant, wait for a meal for half an hour easily. At home, maybe they can't wait 5 minutes. So for the right thing, people have patience. So I think it would be very useful, having transformed so many lives, you have understood the process of transformation probably better than most of us. So how does that happen? And make it easy. Our people are very reasonable, they want it all easy.
So I think the honest answer is, I don't know. But the nuanced answer is that when you plant a seed in the ground, on a farm somewhere, it takes your effort to plant the seed. It takes some effort for you to tend to it, to water it. But it also takes a lot of grace. It takes the grace of the sun, it takes the grace of the wind, it takes the grace of the bees, it takes so much unearned merit. And so the Buddha taught very clearly that you cannot look and say, I want transformation, I want awakening now. You do have to sit to meditate, you do have to lead a virtuous life, you do have to learn how to concentrate the mind. But that is necessary, but it is not sufficient for transformation. So when will conditions ripen? One doesn't know. So how do you continue to stay? Rumi had a very beautiful quote. He says, for dough to turn into bread and be had by the world, you just take dough, it's not useful. It needs to turn into bread. It needs to stay in the oven long enough. So most of us get near the oven and then we say, oh, this is the wrong oven. I want to go in this oven. Or we get in the oven, life gets tough, and then we are like, oh, eject, not now. This is too hot. But at some point, you realize that, man, this is my effort, and I'm waiting till grace arises, till conditions align. And I'm staying in the oven. But even as you have that great resolve, you realize that sometimes you just don't have enough willpower to stay in there. And this is why the Buddha shared very clearly that you need the company of noble friends. So we are all sitting here today, and we can look at ourselves and ask that question, that how are we meeting? If you are coming to this moment and saying, what am I getting? And I am coming from this moment saying, what am I getting? We will have a very superficial connection. That superficial connection will not help you stay in the oven until the dough turns into bread. But if you come into this as a contributor, and I come into this as a contributor, that I am here giving, right? All of you are so generously listening, that probably some of you are feeling sympathy that, all these things have happened and all. So you're like, oh, no, I'm with you. But why is that feeling even arise? So as you tap into that, and as I tap into that, if we meet not from a me to me space, but from a we to we space, that it takes all of cosmos for you to get here, it takes all of cosmos for me to get here, and if we all meet in that way, then I think we have a greater chance for being noble friends, and those noble friends are the ones that will hold our hand while life tests us, while the oven of life cooks us, so that we can be bread for the world.
So, a related thought is that many times when we start thinking of who we are, a lot of questions get answered. But if I never look at myself and all the needs that a nature, the instincts that I want peace, I want food, I want this, I want that, then somehow I give myself this right to ask. Even if I get only 1% or 2%, I never question, who am I to ask all? Like this Kaka Dada told you, that you haven't given up and you call yourself in a pilgrimage. So this transformation, some masters say, for example, we also say, truth is only one of the values in a set of values. Truth without compassion, as Mahatma Gandhi said that, this without that, wealth without character. is a dangerous thing. So similarly, thinking of truth, my truth and others' truth. I know she did this. I know he did this. One is that truth. And the second is, who am I in this connectedness? Is the second truth. And I think this transformation, to my experience, does not begin until I transform this questioning, this asking from the fact of asking and demanding and aspiring to saying, who is this person who is feeling entitled to ask for all of this? And so, if you have, I'm sure you've had thousands of stories of this kind, and there are a lot of people from amongst your volunteers here to vouch for that. This question of knowing your own truth, I remember one of your statements, right in the video, that when you start knowing yourself, the journey of truth really begins.
Yeah. I think Raman Maharishi would say, you should just ask this simple question, who am I? We all have an idea of who we are. We don't actually know. But under close scrutiny, according to Raman Maharishi, if you ask who am I, and actually the I is a fictitious idea, then the whole foundation collapses. So he says, just hold on to this question. This doesn't have an answer, but hold on to this question. Who am I? And why am I doing all the things I'm doing? So I find that to be a profound practice, to ask yourself, who am I? And say, who is this I that's constantly insecure? Who is this I that wants this and wants that all the time? And by the time you get something you want, you are not satisfied and you want the next thing. And then you get the next thing and you're like, we want something else after that. I think you have to question that whole mechanism.
So did something like this happen in your transformation?
Yeah, I mean, there were many moments where my sense of I felt transformed. Even like sometimes, like one time I was in college and I was going to class. I had a midterm exam. And on the way, I saw this old man trying to catch a bus. But he had a limp. So he was like going like this. So the bus stops, but he's limping and he's going to miss the bus. And somehow my heart went out to him. And I had a midterm, I had an exam, I had to go there. But I was like, wow, can I just give him my legs? I mean, it's not a rational thing, but I felt like I wanted to help him and I didn't know how. So that feeling arose in me. And so I sat down on the streets and I said, I don't even know what I said, but in my conscious mind, the feeling was, may he have my legs. And I don't know if that made any difference. It so happened that the bus driver realized that there was this old limping man and he stopped. He comes out of the bus and he tells him, come here, you can join. And he makes the thing. I don't know what role I had. Maybe it was just happenstance. But what I do know is what happened inside me is that shift in identity. We tend to think that your I is here, that I begin, where is Nipun, right? Like we tend to think Nipun stops here and you begin here. But if you start to factor in our mind, like where does my mind begin and where does your mind begin? Where is the boundary of that? And if you think even more deeply about that, you say, okay, if you say, well, right now, if you say who is speaking, you can say Nipun is speaking. That's somewhat true. But to speak, I need to have a thought. And for that thought, I need to exercise my mind. And where is the boundary of my mind? So can I authentically say this is my idea, my words, my speech? No, you cannot. Is it yours? Is it yours? Is it all of us? It's hard to know. So even intellectually, if you start to look at life in this way, you say you actually don't know where the boundaries are. And when you don't know, you have to hold that question, that why am I so certain about what my I is? We have this incredible untested hypothesis of who the I is. And I think we need to test it and realize what the sages tell us is that if you test it enough, you will see that it's actually your confidence has no basis. It's a delusion.
I'm reminded of something else that you said. It sounded very profound to me, but I didn't understand fully. Very connected to what you said is who you are depends upon who I am. It's such a profound thing. So if I feel that I am the boss, then I look at the other person as a junior, as someone subservient. So I have defined myself and therefore I define someone else. So if you could throw more light.
There's a quote, it says, it takes two to know one. Or for those people who like Buddha's teachings, he says codependent co-arising. That actually we are creating this reality between us in each moment. So I can only discover myself in relationship. Because without that, you don't have any connection, but you are always in relationship. You cannot, even if you run away to the Himalayas or you're on a meditation cushion, you are always in relationship with everyone. That actually those relationships are inside in your own ecosystem. So that idea of having reverence, this actually goes back to the first point that everything is the center. Having reverence for life exactly as it is a very deep teaching. I think this was on the invitation also, like there is a quote on my desk it was gifted to me by Brother David Steindl-Rast. He's a Benedictine monk. He's an incredible monk, but it says, whatever what is what I want, nothing else. Whatever what is what I want, nothing else. And that sounds like a nice quote until you realize that this monk who gave it to me has never asked for anything in his life. He is now 94, lives in Austria, incidentally. He's a famous monk. He's a Benedictine monk. And his teaching was, don't ask for anything. So I said, Brother David, like, what does that mean? Like, what, you don't even pour soup? They don't pour soup for themselves. I said, where did you get this confidence? Like, he says that you will be taken care of. And I realized that he is actually a profound meditator. And a profound meditator, I asked him one time a very unique question. Incidentally, I had met him first time after my marriage. I met him, I ran into him, literally. He was coming down the stairs, I was coming this way. As we connected, I was like, wow, who is this guy? Something in me awoke that, oh, this is a noble person. So in between the break, I was like, oh, I'm going to catch a hold of this guy, and I went to him and I said, Brother David, I have a question for you. And it's a question I've never asked anyone else. I don't know where this question came from. I asked him, I said, Brother David, when do you decide when to stop meditating? Not start, when to stop? And he says, you know. He says, sometimes I sit down for meditation and I get up in 1 minute. Sometimes I get up in 10 minutes. Sometimes an hour. Sometimes a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade. He says, one time I sat to meditate and I got up 14 years later. As in, he would go to the bathroom and all, not like one stretch. 14 years. But he didn't say, I'm going to a 14-year retreat. He just sat and he says, I'm here. And his practice this whole time was, whatever what is what I want. And after all of that, what does he come to? He says, I have to have reverence for all beings, for all life. I am related to everything in all shapes, sizes, and forms. So the culmination of all this practice is to embrace the present moment as it is and to evoke a kind of reverence for the life in front of us. So not that, oh, this is some delusion and I'm not interested. It's like, oh man, there is great joy. Today we were in this circle, we were talking about joy, which is it's so beautiful. People who are actually have cultivated, they will always have joy. Now, you don't imagine Gandhi to be a person who would like be smiling and like all like Dalai Lama, But that's just on the external interface. Inside, they have to have joy. He's just the other day I was reading something about Gandhiji. I was listening to this video. Raman Maharishi's student was a guy named Papaji, and he ran into Gandhiji one time, and then he says, "This guy is a noble person. I want to serve him." And so he's sitting there one time with Gandhiji alone, and he says, "Where am I hearing this chant? Ram, Ram, Ram." He looks and he says, "Anyone chanting?" Nobody was chanting. Then he says, I looked at Gandhiji's lips, and his lips were not moving. He says, "Where is this coming from?" And he realized his very being was chanting. I have met monks like that because they're so deeply embedded in this. So even when death comes to his doorstep, in the movie Gandhi, they translated this kind of awkwardly, right? Like it says, when Godse shoots him, the English translation was, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Like, sometimes we say, "Oh God," like the mics are not working, "Oh God." That's not what Gandhiji was. I mean, he said Ram, 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 right? But where is that Ram coming from even? He's not saying, "Oh, this is my practice, let me do my practice, okay, I'm ready for death." There is this great joy in that. Right? He may not externally smile, but there has to be this, to be constantly in that state of chanting, to be in that state of reverence, to be in that state of unconditional service that we are all recipients of indirectly, is this inexhaustible joy. Right? So I think we are in relationship with each other. Right? And there is no way around it. So the more you cultivate, at least all the great saints I have met, the more they are cultivated, the more reverence they have for life. And the more reverence they have for life, the more joy they exhibit.
One thing very commonplace comes to my mind, and this is that we chopped trees in a very carefree manner till we understood they are the ones who gave oxygen. When I chop a tree, I chop myself. These linkages the world is starting to make at some stage. So what the sages have always said is about this interconnectedness. So who I am, this interconnectedness is a matter of discovery, is the kind of message that I'm getting. And, he has an amazing practice, and maybe I'll throw the floor open for questions, of bowing. So maybe just say a couple of lines about, this practice of bowing.
I mean, my personal practice of bowing is not that amazing, but I know people who are very close to me whose practice of bowing is downright amazing. Particularly, I will share the story of Reverend Hengshar. He is a Buddhist monk for the last 45 years. He decided to go on a bowing pilgrimage across California for 800 miles. Every 3 steps, he would bow to the ground.
Every 3 steps?
Every 3 steps for 800 miles. And he was an incredible person. He is an incredible person of character. So even at night, imagine if we did bowing, we would be like exhausted. And then it's nighttime, we'd be like, "Oh, I need to really rest, He didn't lie down. They sleep like this. No back support for 28 years. He did that practice. But the greatness of his cultivation is not the mystical states, is not the stories, although those were amazing. The greatness was the humility with which he enters and meets each moment. So he did this 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage, landed up at the city of 10,000 Buddhas, where his teacher was. And at that point, everyone is like, "Wow, like what you have done is just remarkable, and how you have done it is remarkable." He goes up to his teacher. He did it it took him almost 3 years, 2 years and 9 months. He did it in silence even. And to do it in California like this, like nobody understands. What is this bowing, And people, 3 times he was at gunpoint, and his commitment was all the left turns and right turns you take to get to this moment, to deliver this negativity my way, I'm going to rebound it back with compassion. You may act in a negative way to me, but behind that negative action is a whole lineage of negative conditions, and may it stop with me. I will not carry it forward. I will absorb the negative and I will rebound it back with Maitri. I'll rebound it back with Metta. So he does this. He ends up at the city of 10,000 Buddhas. He goes and sees his teacher and he says, I realize that I haven't bowed even once properly. I seek your permission to bow for another 3 years around this Buddha hall. What is the destination of all this? When you meet him, he's so humble. He came to our house once, and my nephew at that time was 4 years old. And so, in our culture, of course, we say, you should bow down and all this. And bow down, that to this person who knows bowing so much, And so we were like, yeah, you should bow down, But we didn't have time, and anyways, they kind of randomly ran into each other. So the parents are thinking, like this is a teaching moment, we should do this and that, and he is moving out, all this chaos. In the middle of this, Reverend Hengsher meets my 4-year-old nephew, and he says, yeah, this is a teaching moment, it's a good point, what should I do? He goes and bows down to the 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old is going to mirror. So what does he do? Without any instruction, he says, oh, that was a good idea, I'm going to bow down to you. So the destination of all these practices is this incredible humility that I want to take the shape of the container life puts me in. It doesn't have a thick identity around it. So I find that to be incredibly powerful. So he's a good guy. You guys should look him up.
So with that, Nipun Bhai, this has really been one hell of a story, even for you, of going with the flow. And
for everyone.
We bow down to everyone for their patience. But I'll throw the floor open for questions. And you may have come with certain expectations and certain clarifications.
But this could have been an upgrade. This is like a business class upgrade, Absolutely. So, and that's on us. It's on us. Yeah.
So, let's just be very brief and pointed. Thank you.
Turning point was when you were driving and you saw the billboard. What was the other series of turning points for you for the transformation, personal transformation?
I mean, there were many. I think one of the big things I did early on in my life is spend time with people on their deathbeds. At 17, I said, I want to serve. Where am I going to go to? I said, I want to go to the hardest place to serve. So I was thinking of all these ideas. And I said, the hardest place would be for me to be around dying patients. So I went to a hospice. And I, as a volunteer, my job is to be with them. So I would meet people, I would engage with them, I would serve them in whatever small ways I could. And then you get a note that saying, like such and such person has passed away. So I would never see them again. And that's a very jarring thing, because at that age you are thinking, everything is going to continue. Right? What if we all realize that, man, this could be it? And that adds a very different flavor to your own understanding. So I always thought, because they will always tell you, when your job, you're doing in the US, there's this thing called 401k, retirement and all this. So I was like at 20, age of 20, 21, you are thinking about 65, and everyone tells you that, first you should do this, 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 and then practice generosity after you retire. And I was like, man, who even knows how long we'll be around? So I had some profound experiences with people on their deathbeds. And I think it just taught me that it is not a switch. You cannot turn it on and off. I remember this one patient, he had like a lot of tubes inside of him. He was in his final days. And I went to see him, and I used to get groceries for him. So I put the groceries in, and I said, I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Ahern. And he says, no, Nipun, can you come in just for a few minutes, And I went in. And this guy was so scared. He started speaking, and as soon as he would and he would need a huge breath, so he'd be like, take in all this oxygen, then he starts speaking on a random topic, and he just spoke and spoke and spoke for 3 straight hours. And here I am as an 18-year-old sitting by his bedside saying, oh my God, I wish I could take his pain away, but there is no switch. So it made me realize that if I'm going to do something, no, I'm not going to wait till 65, man. I'm doing it now.
Actually, friends, Nipun Bhai delivered a great talk on death. On the ServiceSpace link, please check it out. And he has explained what death did to him. Death, just as the question, who I am, And when you think of death, it can teach you the most amazing things, and you shared some of it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
In our day-to-day life, suppose somebody has done something negative to you.
Yeah.
How do you create that empathy or maitri?
Yeah.
It's easier said than done. How you would have done it, and how would you?
I think the best example I have, the best way I understood it was one of my friends who works with people who are in prison for life. And he was doing a circle with all of them. They had no chance of getting out. And he would teach meditation and engage with them and just serve them. So one day he had an idea. He says, takes out a blackboard and he says, okay, it creates 2 columns. He says, one column, he says, how many years have you been in jail? So 10 years, 20 years, 13 years, all that. And he added it up, 400 something years. And then he creates a second column. And in the second column, he says, how long was your moment of rage for which you are coming to jail? And it's like sometimes just a few minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. They added it up, and it was like for a few hours of collective rage, we are spending hundreds of years in prison. So you can imagine, if you are in that position and all of a sudden this is mirrored to you, it's very powerful space. And in that space, one guy raises his hand and he says, you know what I think? He says, I think hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. That if you have been hurt by others, you will carry forward that hurt. So everyone's like, oh, that's true. And the circle went on. And then a second guy, a little bit later in that circle, he says, I would like to build on that. And he says, healed people, heal people.
Healed people, heal people.
So when we see somebody, usually say there is some negativity coming our way, we tend to say, oh, it's coming here from here. But actually behind that door, there is a lineage of conditions. So Gandhiji actually taught this very clearly. He says, you can resist the action, but you have to love the person, because the person is much more than the action. And by the person, it's not just a human being, it's their entire lineage. And that entire lineage may have one strand of some negativity, but with that one strand of negativity, there would be thousands of strands of positivity as well. So if you throw away the one strand of negativity, you are actually throwing away all the positivity as well. And that is not in service to you or this person. So once that becomes clear, you are like, oh, okay. Yeah, sometimes you have to draw a boundary, and that's okay. But like we were just saying earlier in the day, that you don't draw the boundary with like, no, you just say, not now. I cannot do it now. I don't have the inner equanimity. I don't have the outer circumstances, whatever your reasons. But if you are able to awaken those inner resources, then man, if you bless it, everybody wins. If you are patient, if you are tolerant, if you can generate that maitri, you are blessing their whole lineage. And not only does that person need your blessings, but those blessings you also need, because you also have the same, in some way, shape or form, you have your own lineages of negativity, So when I expand my view in that way, then it's no longer, oh, this person has said this, how dare they? It's like, oh, this person in this moment with this kind of mind, with these conditions which I don't even know, has resulted in this friction. Can I use my merits to soften that? Can I soften my gaze at least?
So a lot of great teachers, they talk about suffering and the role, it has on the process of transformation, awakening or seeking. So what, did you also have some kind of, go through some kind of suffering, or which brought you to this path? Or I just wanted curious to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are all, I was sharing earlier today, it was I love this line. I was with some Buddhist monks, and they were talking about building community, and says, how can you build community? And he says, the one thing that unifies all of us is that we are brothers and sisters in suffering.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Who is not going to have old age, disease, sickness, and death? Can anyone raise their hand who is not going to have that? So if we are all going to be experiencing that, man, we can hold each other's hand. So I would say I am suffering, and that suffering is actually the basis of my interconnection with all beings. So that suffering, with suffering, there is an awakening, or there is a wish inside you to come out of that suffering. And when that wish is not just singularly yours, it leads to compassion. Compassion's definition is the wish to come out of suffering. So if I can see the suffering in me, then I can see the suffering in others, and if I relate in that way, it can actually be a great opportunity for awakening compassion. So for me, I do suffer, but I think like everyone else, to be alive is to suffer. But I think that is a great opportunity for cultivating compassion, because we are all in that mode.
Yes, sir. How it is possible to carry truth with you always?
I would say noble friends. We have to have the company of good, noble friends. That how can you stay connected to truth? How can you hold that question, who am I? How can you continue to evolve? How do you stay on the path? How do you stay in the oven? You try yourself, but over time, I think you need the company of noble friends.
What is the meaning of truth in life?
That you have to ask yourself. You have to discover that.
What is truth to you?
What is truth to me? I don't think it can be described in words. The Tao which is spoken is not the eternal Tao. So I think anything that you reduce into the faculty of mind and matter is necessarily imperfect. It's an abstraction. So I think it's a question, it's a helpful question to ask, what is truth for each one of us? But we will not be able to understand that by creating a concept and be sharing in this way. I think you have to experience it and you have to live it.
Yeah, so we spoke about patience, and usually there's a lot of talk about patience. But what happens when patience turns into apathy? There's a danger of patience turning into apathy, right?
Yeah.
So what then?
Yeah, when you disengage, you create apathy. But when you can stay engaged, stay connected to the compassion in you, which requires that you stay connected to the suffering in you and to the suffering in the other person, because you have that shared bond, then you will care for them. And when you care for them, you won't reduce it to apathy. You won't say, this doesn't matter. So yeah, how do you make sure you are not apathetic? I mean, I don't know if patience is the opposite of apathy, but I think the core of your question is, how do I make sure that I continue to care? Right? Like like there's so much wrong with the world, and sometimes we get overwhelmed, and you're like, look, that beggar, he's there, and there are thousands of these people. Why should I, But you look at people like Dalai Lama, even some of you here. Dalai Lama one time was going through a slum community, and someone was like looking at him, and he was moved to tears. And so they said, Dalai Lama, you have seen so many slums, so much suffering, so much you have seen, so many slum communities. Like, this is not a new thing. Why would you start crying? And he says, I cry every time. So I think the more in touch you are with your own self, the more you realize the interconnection, and the more you realize the interconnection, the more you care. So I think the answer would be at least my approach would be to really deepen in your own awareness of your interconnection with that suffering. So there may be 1,000 beggars out there, but that one person that is in front of you is actually not a random coincidence. So you have to honor that. You can't swipe it and say, oh, there's thousands of people suffering, so I don't care. But if you start looking and saying, why does that one person in this one way, shape, or form, they are here? What does that mean? What is the door that is willing to open for me because of that? So I think if you can approach it in that way, it can become, you start to get out of your apathy. If you see it as an opportunity. If it's like a job that you have to do and you're like, okay, I should be kind and I should get karma points and this and that, then you might get tired of it. But if you realize that, man, this is a great opportunity right here in front of me, I can be of service. So then you will be, and there is great joy in that. So if you experiment with it, on the flight, in one of the flights here, there was a guy he had a bag and he seemed like one of those demanding customers. And so he goes to the air hostess and He says, can you put this up? Now, it seemed like he could have put it up himself, but he was like telling the air hostess to do this. And the air hostess was a skinny person, and it wasn't clear that she herself, it seemed like it would be easier for that guy than the stewardess. And I saw that, and I was like, I'm anyways waiting behind until that situation clears because you're trying to walk through the aisle. And I said, I can relate because my wife is also short, so she also needs help of other people to put it in the cabin. So I said, let me do that for you. And that woman was so happy. She thanked me like 10 times in front of everyone around. She's like, oh, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your kindness. And I was like, oh, it was such a small thing. But you realize that once you see that even these small things can actually be such a great doorway to joy, such a great doorway to connection, would you ever want to miss a chance? You wouldn't. Right? So I think I would say just go in that direction, try to see the opportunity, and then the apathy starts to melt away. Then it's just like, oh, another chance to be of service. The reward for service, I think Swami Chinmayananda or someone said, reward for service is more service.
Hi, Nipun. Chintan here. We're meeting after years. How do we train our minds to quote discomfort? Because typically, we want to feel good, right? Whether it's through relationships, entertainment, food, workplaces. You are asking us to go with the flow, but it also means swimming upstream to extend your own metaphor. How does one do that? Because this at moments of death of loved ones, or of even like stars that we love, there is this momentary vairagya sort of thing. But how does one sustain it and simplify life on an everyday basis instead of just during that one moment?
Yeah, I think you have two questions in there. One is to sustain. I would go back to the company of noble friends. But your first question was, how do you hold these difficult, situations? For me, a quote by Martin Luther King has always been a very helpful tool. He says peace, because he stood for peace, he says peace is not the absence of tension. That was his quote, but I would add to it and I would say peace is actually the skillful embrace of tension. Like the violin string is an example that is simple and makes a lot of sense, that if it's too tight, it pops. Too loose, doesn't make music. But if it's the right tension, so tension is not something to be like thrown away. It's actually an opportunity to embrace it so you can create music. But to embrace it, to find peace. Peace is not running away from conflict. Peace is actually going in there with great equanimity and saying, I am here, which is what I think we all love, at least I love about Gandhiji. Gandhiji didn't say, go and get hit by the British and be a vegetable. The instructions were that these people are here, they have batons, you are going to get cracked on the head, there are people who are going to take you to the hospital, right? And thousands of people lined up, but what were their instructions were, look the soldier in the eye and say that the negativity with which you are striking me pales in comparison with the love which I am seeing you. And that love melts you. This was Gandhiji's technology. So what he was doing is he is saying, let us build our equanimity so that we are not running away from tension, but we actually have a container to hold that tension with great skillfulness. And I think people who do that are beacons of peace. So, yes. Yeah.
What makes you angry?
Good question. Definitely the mics not working doesn't make me angry. Angry, maybe angry is not the right word, but I feel sad when I see myself or other people banging their head against the wall and misdirecting that blame to external circumstances. It hurts my heart when I see that. And you cannot go and tell somebody, stop banging your head against the wall, because that person doesn't think they are doing that. And you're like, wow, how, it's a thing that hurts my heart. And at the same time, I say, look, I'm willing to bow another 3 years so that I can be here in service, in support, metaphorically speaking. So it's also a chance to grow my heart. So anything that hurts your heart is usually a chance to grow your heart. So I look at it in that way. Yeah.
Sir, how can we define if he's a noble friend or not?
The hierarchy. No. Okay, yeah. I'll tell you my approach. It's actually a good question, right? Because if we are not noble ourselves, how can we recognize noble outside? Of course, you can only recognize that which is within you. But I'll tell you my approach. That what you cannot make up in quality, you can make up for in quantity. So instead of saying I'm going to make an offering or I'm going to bow to the holy ones in this circle, I'll bow to everybody. Maybe 1 or 2 of you are holy, maybe 10 of you are holy. This is fantastic, right? Like that's what Reverend Hengshar was doing with my nephew. He's not trying to scheme and figure out if he's noble or not, and I only want to do things with noble people. He's saying, man, I bow to everybody.
So, if I understood you correctly, that the consciousness of nobility in yourself will guide you in this.
Yeah.
That you will not judge people to be ignoble.
Yeah.
You are conscious about nobility.
Yeah.
And you're looking for that nobility in other people. If you are not sure, you're still okay to go with them. So it is the consciousness in yourself about nobility, your idea of nobility.
Yeah. You are actually bowing to that. But then if you start to see that nobleness everywhere, that means you have a lot of nobleness in you, because you are able to see beyond just the immediate action. You are able to see the entire lineage, which means your eyes and heart have opened that big. You have the mic, so you have the power. Just for.
So in the current scenario, the way things are going around the world and everywhere, there is this compassion in every one of us.
Yeah.
We feel this compassion, this motive to serve and this. But then with the societal cycle, like to study, to earn, to support the family, and all of this, like how do we keep that compassion with ourselves? And not let it turn into guilt, like to not serve the society.
Yeah.
How we should, in this cycle of things or responsibilities which are to be met.
Yeah. So you're saying that if you sometimes feel like you kind of have to be in service, so you kind of feel guilty that you have all this and others don't, and you want to be helpful, but you can't always help everybody in every situation. So what helps me with guilt is its antidote, which is gratitude. So guilt says, I have a lot and I'm not doing enough. But gratitude says, I have a lot and I would like to keep paying forward, because I cannot pay backwards. Right? Starting with 9 months of a gift that our mothers give us, you cannot pay back for that. So you cannot go around your whole life, oh my God, my mother gave me so much and I'm now indebted forever. Right? And you don't want to give out of that guilt, but you want to give out of that joy of gratitude. So when guilt comes, it's usually an indication that you have solidified the I, that instead of things flowing through you, you have kept too much inside you. So when you keep too much and then you say, oh, I have too much and I need it to go. But instead of keeping too much here, if you start flowing it, then it's like a much stronger process, because you will feel gratitude. As you are giving, you will get more. And as you get more, you are flowing more forward. And so it becomes a really powerful shift. So I would recommend working on practices of gratitude. Even as you sleep every day, write down 3 things you are grateful for. And once that becomes a habit, it will crowd out all the guilt, because you won't keep that much, because it's flowing through you. So there's nothing to be, it's like, what's there to be guilty of, because you're not keeping as much. Yeah.
Nipun bhai, hi. So my question is, first thing what you spoke just now, service demands attracts more service, which is absolutely true, because if you do for some people and you feel so the request for service will come to you only. They get attracted to your energy only. That is one thing which I absolutely agree. What would you do in a circumstance when you are walking past and somebody is hitting a dog or a mute animal or trying to kill a cat, how would you react to the situation like that?
I think you have to live into that moment. So the way in which you would react to it would be different than the way in which I would react to it.
Now I'll copy the way you react to it.
Yeah, that's the thing. That I wish I would like to copy the Buddha and you can copy me, right? That would be great. But you cannot do that.
No, but what would be your reaction to a
So
situation
the
like
guiding
that?
principle is how do you know, we were talking about this yesterday, how do you know what is yours to do? Because if you start doing what is someone else's work to do, then you will not be happy and you will not be able to serve that person. So you have to really look deep inside. You cannot copy paste because your karmic conditions are so different from the person next to you, from the person next to you, and mine. So, but the principle that you can hold is to go into that moment and say, what is this moment teaching me? What is my intuition and how do I refine it? So initially you will fail. You try to do something and you overdo it or you underdo it or the other person doesn't really land. But over time, you start to refine your intuition and to hold it with reverence.
And if your intuition says that kill the man, then what do you
Yeah, then we have a problem.
I have a question. Many of us live with like certain goals and like sometimes there might be a number attached to it or I want to be able to do impact. In my case, I want to impact like 1 million kids in the next 5 years, for example,
Yeah.
the work I do. How do you interpret your purpose and goal?
I think initially in life, you want to do what you love. After a while, you learn to love whatever you are doing. And after a while, you learn to just do what you're doing. Actually, if you look at it, initially you're like, oh, this makes me come alive. I want to do this, But then over time, you're like, oh, actually I don't really love to do that. I love what it evokes in me. And I have the capacity to actually do the dishes in the same way, right? To do the most menial chores in the same way. And then over time, you are just doing what you do. It doesn't even need a purpose. It doesn't need hope for the future. Because when we look at impact, you are thinking that you are going to affect causality for all these people. And that is a very problematic scenario. The great sages of the world, the great saints of the world have come and gone. And somehow our ego says, oh, now I'm going to be the person who is going to change humanity's suffering. It's a little bit problematic. So to actually hold, and the ironic thing about this is that if you approach life in this way, that you are ultimately just doing what you do, there is no question of extracting love, then you become like a flute, like an empty instrument through which the winds of nature flow, and you start to do something that is actually way beyond.
My question is that, however, the mind always wants planning and, okay, I want to do this. This is the work I want to do. This is where I want to go in life. And it always keeps asking for that versus surrender. Like they're very two distinct qualities both of them have.
Yeah.
So my question is like, how do you bring a balance or find the center between both of these?
Yeah.
Because society also asks for planning, what is your plan? And all around us, we're surrounded by those questions.
It's a good question. I asked that question to a Zen master one time. And he says, you should plan, but you should be willing to surrender your plan when you need to. That's a nice balance. As in, do the work, but don't worry about the outcomes, so to speak. So have a plan. We had a plan today, but we surrendered it. And then who knows where this is going to go. Personally, for me, this is fantastic. Even for all of you, right? No, not like that. I'm saying we none of us are going to forget this, right? In a way, it's like, it's fantastic.
For you, like there might be 10 requests coming in for a session.
That is a very good question.
So you were talking about intuition. I'm sure that has some role, but could you just share?
Well, that's a very nice question. She says, what is your algorithm for deciding what you prioritize in life?
Or just even in the previous one, you said make plans and then surrender. So even to make that plans, how do you decide?
Yeah. So we can just take a look at, for example, how did I decide to say yes to this situation or any situation? For me, I lead with relationships. And it started as a practice actually in my own house, where we had these awakened circles that I was telling you about. I decided to practice. See, initially I used to love a lot of music and I had all these CDs back in the days. And anytime I gave a CD to anybody, it would have my address and I knew exactly. I was like, okay, you know, I'm giving this to you, when are you giving this back? But I wouldn't say that, you know, I wanted to be generous. So I would be like, oh yeah, how are you enjoying the music, you know? But then over time, I realized, man, I can be a better person than this. So I decided to we have a bookshelf in our house. And I said, this bookshelf, I'm just going to keep refilling. And anyone can take any book, anytime. And so people would take, and I would be like, man, people take so many things. Some people should feel like putting some back, you know. You do all these kind of negotiations. And I was like, and at some point I said, stop calculating. And I used to do the same at the kitchen sink. I would be like, wow, you know, we are feeding you, we are taking care of all. In the US, everyone does their own dishes, you know. So we're like, we're doing all this. The least you can do is not race out. Like, at least do somebody's plate, you know. So I would secretly scheme and I would be like, okay, you know, that's. And then I said, no, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to do everyone's dishes, no negotiations. And as soon as you do that, life responds in a very different way. So one of my practices was that anyone who asks me anything, I mean, I shouldn't say this out too loud, you know, but on an awakened circle, I decided I'm just going to say yes. And, you know, that's like a dangerous proposition, you know. But what I was experimenting with is that I don't just want to use my calculating mind to figure out the opportunity and the cost here, right? So instead of doing that, I said, I want to lead with relationships. So if you care for an hour of silence, if you care for circle of sharing and listening and learning from each other, if you care for receiving and giving without any price tags in a pure way, in that kind of a field, if I cannot give unconditionally, what kind of a person am I, right? So after my dishes and after my bookshelf and my CDs, I learned a little bit. So I said, okay, anyone who asks me anything, I will say yes. And that was an incredible experience. Right? I've done so many talks and stuff, you know, and some of them will probably have 10 views, not 10, but, you know, but the one that has had the most amount of views, that has gone all over the place, came because this woman, after dinner, comes up and says, Nipun, I'm organizing this event, and we had all these speakers, and this one speaker cancelled. Can you fill in for that speaker? I mean, talk about ego deflating invitation, you know. Like, it's like, yeah, man, we don't have anybody, right? Can you come in and do something, you know? But that was at an awakened circle. So I was like, okay, you know, and using my judgmental mind, I would never have thought that I thought it was some random thing. And I was like, okay, but that's fine. I'm willing to embrace it. I took it. It ended up being a massive conference. And that talk has been thus far the most popular video online. So what I do is say yes to relationships. So if we hug, if we connect, I said yes to Vallabh Bhai. Right? I'm not interested, for me, it's less about the impact. But as a result, I can come and say, Mike works, doesn't work, it doesn't matter to me. Like whether we are in circle or some other shape, it's like you are just in the flow because you are leading with relationships, you are leading with connection. And underneath that connection, you have to make sure that those connections are desire-free, that they are rooted in the values you care for. So our connection is not I don't know, you do investment stuff, right?
Used to. Used to.
But it's service, it's inner transformation, it's meditation. I don't even know like but if you care about these values, I care about them. So I have to be clear inside. If I start scheming inside and say, I want to only have relationships with XYZ in this way or that way, then your algorithm won't work. So for me, I prioritize based on values through relationship.
So I think we must stop.
Yes,
yes. And people have their plans and whatever.
Thank you so
But
much.
I want to point to something, right? This hall was echoing like anything. Can you hear an echo now? These things happen. This is right here.
Yeah.
Right? It's such a problem. Even when we were preparing for the event, we had this huge problem. So anyway, Nipun Bhai, Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can't thank you enough. And we have to bow to each one of the
Yes,
audience here
yes.
for their amazing patience and accommodation. And you've been a great audience.
I just want to say thank you to all of you. Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's beautiful because we embrace the moment in this way, and I just feel, I hope you hug somebody you don't know and build a relationship on these values. I hope I get a chance to hug, all of you. But can I invite all of us to a minute of silence to close? It's a secret way of hugging everyone. If we all just pray, not pray or whatever that metaphor is, that if there is goodness that is generated here, may it not stay within the four walls of this hall, may it go out to all the corners of the world that could use a little extra nudging of love. So just a minute in silence. Thank you all. I hope we get a chance to stay connected. And thank you, Vallabh Bhai. Thank you.